Sri Lanka has been following an unaligned foreign policy over the years and been a pioneer of the non-aligned movement, and a very strong role Sri Lanka played and continues, I think, to play the same principal role. President's foreign policy has once again pledged that we are committed to a neutral, non-aligned foreign policy. We have pursued that after administration, government, and the mandate President has received from the country. Sri Lanka's friendship with China is one of the longest friendship soon after China formed the revolutionary government under Chairman Mao Zedong. It was the UNP administration of that time that had initiated the first trade agreement. Subsequently, the MAP government under Prime Minister W.R.D. Bandaranaike gave China the diplomatic recognition, the status of an embassy, which was one of the first embassies that were established of the MAP government and with Soviet Union and other countries. So it is nothing new. China has been a friend in all crisis and progress with Sri Lanka. So is India. Sri Lankan government has not selected on its relations with any of the established relations that Sri Lanka had. Of course, anyone can interpret and say such and such a project was not given to such and such a country, but such and such a country. But now, even now, last week, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government signed an agreement with the United States based one of the leading companies in the power generation, alternative energy. So, what is the basis of this allegation? There is no basis. When one wants to criticize, it will want to criticize and label Sri Lanka. It's not fair. Sri Lanka has stood very clearly on a non-aligned, neutral foreign policy on the international forums and regionally also. On and on we hear these economic terms that are created and planted into the economic books, but what people are wanting is progress. I recall as a university student in the United States, when the United States did not recognize China. But at that time, it was the President Nixon who flew to China. Perhaps the present generation doesn't know this. Flew to China and gave full recognition of the People's Republic of China and established economic relations. Now, did anyone call and say Richard Nixon is pro-China? No. It was for economic and international understanding that progress was recognized. China was progressing economically, one of the giants, economic giants of the world, which the Western countries have accepted. So why shouldn't Sri Lanka also recognize one of its long-standing friends and get into whatever possible agreements for economic progress? It's same with India. We have got into so many agreements with India. So I don't think this way of labeling that if you borrow more from this country, you get into this. If one country cuts off its assistance and trade with Sri Lanka, we are pushed into one corner. We have to overcome all these problems because the international arena is totally different to these orthodox cages that we have been following 40-50 years ago. The international giants will know how they could settle these issues. As long as China's relations with Sri Lanka, we have recognized China's sovereignty over China's territory. So we do not think that this is going to be any new problem for Sri Lanka. Our position is very clear from the very beginning. Every government has had different agreements on different fronts with Israel, but our position in relation to Palestine has not changed. We are not only have dealt on military equipment. A lot of Sri Lankans were working in Israel, which is most recent. So, but our position in relation to the Palestinian people and the recognition that has to be given to Palestine continues as a foreign policy key principal position. Yeah, the High Commission to India has not gone almost. I think we are nearing a year. He should go. He is our neighbor. His High Commissioner been designated. I think he's been cleared from Parliament, his appointment, so he should go. There are one or two more who has to ask for time, but only a few months, and they are on the. Also, we'll have to go and assume the position that has been entrusted by the President and Parliament. If not, we will have to act accordingly. We appoint ambassadors as our envoy to a country because we can't send hundreds of public servants. So, such appointments should be considered in the highest esteem as well as the priority in serving one's motherland when one's appointed as a diplomat. These things have come up, of course. We are in the process of studying, advising, directing and instructing. I hope it doesn't get dragged. I, as Foreign Minister, have had so many discussions with the EU ambassadors on this matter, and we are having ongoing discussions. We had the first round in January, which no one refers to as a responsible government. The undertakings given, we have pursued on them. We did submit our reports, which were due third week of June, to EU Commission, which is important, and the next round would be in September. So why get excited over issues which still is under discussion. Commitment to the 27 points that the EU had made. Sri Lanka has always pledged, and as they are monitoring progress. They are monitoring progress in workplaces, which is one. They are monitoring progress in labour laws that we have made. Yes, we have promulgated the labour laws. Some have been presented, some have been presented to Parliament, so that it goes through legislation. We have had really 1 year of Sri Lanka's time was spent on elections. No one can say no, EU knows that. So there have been so many issues raised in different parliaments, but that does not mean that Sri Lanka, what it enjoys with that specific country, is lost. We have not forgotten that Sri Lanka or any other country, in order to qualify for this, has to be below a certain GDP level, and we are almost on the very end of it. So it's a matter how the EU would consider. If we pass, definitely our conditions will have to change, and we'll have to go in for a different agreement. And we are at the moment right in the tail end of the income levels that they are prescribing, but we are pursuing with the GSP conditions, and we have shown progress. PTA, there is a committee that the Cabinet of Ministers appointed to revisit PTA. So it is very clear to the EU that we are following the conditions, and on other human rights issues that are being raised. Some are very old issues, some have been corrected. We are living in 2021, and some are very old cases in relation to the Office of the Missing Person, Reparation Office, and other offices. We have made very positive steps, and even fund allocations have been increased, the budgetary provisions. So we are on the move positively. We have also, the President pardoned and released 16 LTT prisoners, and some more perhaps after being studied will be considered on the relevant charges, etc. So how can one say without knowing what is happening in Sri Lanka or ground level, one can make a statement somewhere else? It's always being followed by the relevant ambassador and the EU ambassadors on the progress made, and we hope that we will be able to. But I must also mention that everything that we export to EU is not GSP. Let us not forget that the very successful businessmen who export to Europe, different countries, and not under the GSP concession. We are competing, our businessmen, and exporting many products to the EU. So it's not just one single window. There are so many windows that are open through which we are already operating. Our private sector, very successful in their ventures. Our government assurances are being implemented. I must say that we are on the positive path. Our relationship continues, except for the COVID period, which both sides, both countries, which have a multilateral or bilateral, would understand. Our economic relations or exports have been on the rise. Even the apparel industry got opening to go into the United States market, and we have been keeping it going. To the UK the same. So issues are being raised. I guess about countries across the world. Sri Lanka is not the only one. In the UN Human Rights Commission, if you go and read the report, so many resolutions are brought against so many countries. Sri Lanka has very clearly taken a path of positive reaction. As I mentioned before, the Presidential Commission on some other issues that are allegations that are being raised was appointed by the President. President appointed Supreme Court Judge Nawaz to go into the President matters. It is now proceeding. In relation to PTA, I mentioned that we are revisiting. So these are the same issues of missing people. So many thousands have been listed, and government through the Missing Persons and Office of Reparation is in the process of granting relief, etc., that have been recommended. So we should not only talk of what was not happened in 3-4 years ago. We are progressing, and relations with all these countries have been good. Our President is expected to go to the British Commonwealth sessions if it's held, invited by the British Prime Minister and the British government. So how can we are going for the COP summit in Glasgow. President has accepted the invitation. So how can we say that the relations are in a very, very bad situation? Questions have been taken up, raised, followed up. We are following the SDGs of the UN, and Sri Lanka has shown a positive in the index of SDGs. So I don't think it's fair for this comment. Of course, we have to face criticism because Sri Lanka defeated the most dangerous terrorist organization, the LTT. And since then, there have been issues that so many organizations are raising, objecting to, and creating various one-sided figures which have no basis. All that now is being revisited once again. In their own countries, the figures have been challenged by special authorities. So it is not fair for Sri Lanka to be criticized in this manner. This is the policy that we have adopted, and our dialogue continues, friendly dialogue with them. No, I don't think it's like that. Sri Lanka has been acting very independently, and Sri Lanka has been supporting some of the candidatures of countries which did not support Sri Lanka at the Geneva sessions in terms of different UN agency committees, commissions that are appointed. So Sri Lanka has continued to take a neutral non-aligned position, but as being a group on key issues, Sri Lanka has been always pursuing this position in working in larger country blocks. And this is what happens. With Britain, I had a discussion with the British Commonwealth Minister the week before this meeting in Geneva, and our position was explained. We have a very cordial relationship. Of course, we have differences because the differences have been forced on others. If Sri Lanka was able to defeat the LTTE, if the LTTE is being housed in some countries, even after those countries call them the most dangerous terrorist unit, we have a right to question how could you house terrorists against the same decision of after proscribing LTT terrorism. I mean, if a country proscribes the LTT terrorist organization continuously over and over again over the years, how can one say such a terrorist organization could operate or should be given the right to criticize democratically elected parliaments of our countries with false allegations? So there is always questions among countries in different areas where there has to be dialogue and understanding, and certain matters that are cleared. We are working with Britain on monitoring illicit trafficking in the seas. We are working with them in relation to marine disasters, and we are also working with them on anti-drug policies internationally. We don't see how every move of a country, there have been so many Commonwealth countries that criticize each other. There's Canada that is being criticized today within Canada. So Sri Lanka has had good relations, and we maintain it at a very high level. Of course, Geneva has had two sides of this main argument. One is politically questioning about the government. Secondly are the issues of ground situation, which have been on which we have progressed, and we have submitted the reports, and even in September we would submit further what we have done in the country in relation to the matters raised by different countries. So I don't think, but if some countries don't please the people of Sri Lanka electing President Gotabaya Rajapaksa as the president of the country, it is very sad. I mean, this is EU countries were monitoring the election, and they said it's a free and fair election, a good model. And then issues are raised because President Rajapaksa is in office, or President Rajapaksa's political party is having overall control, overwhelming majority in parliament. These are of course political matters. Sri Lanka is a geopolitically very important strategic location. Let us not forget the Indian Ocean, and Asia is the future fastest growing economic development out of the continents. Everyone wants Asia. Who doesn't want Asia? The United States wants to invest. Canadians wants to invest. British would like to invest. But there's a growing economic realignment also within Asia. Now some of the giants are emerging within Asia, economic giants. So obviously these matters do become an important issue in relations with Sri Lanka. And democracy, we are the oldest democracy. We are the oldest parliamentary democracy. Can anyone turn around and say Sri Lanka has enjoyed 90 years of universal suffrage? When our voters went to vote in 1931, Most of these other countries did not have universal suffrage. And we have elected representatives. Government said come and government said gone. On and off, issues have been raised on Sri Lanka. Of course, the present issue is being really raised. The whole issue is after the defeat of the LTT, the diaspora has a tremendous influential base in most of these countries. I would not say in numbers, yes, in numbers also, but also how they have entrenched into those societies. That plays, keep on lobbying politicians. This is one of the key factors of how Sri Lanka is being targeted continuously. If you take on the principles of policy, Sri Lanka has always maintained the principles that it have been committed to. But if you take individually of related issues or some issues in relation to pockets of in administration, one could always raise, and that also could be raised on any other country. Any other country, and it's been raised in all other countries today. We did not see this type of massive demonstrations in the Western capitals. Do we see? No. But do we raise this? No. Because we maintain a very high position on principles. Now I think we are revisiting the PTA and the relief that we have started and relaxation of some of the areas I mentioned earlier, and the PTA will be revisited. President had requested from Cabinet that we submit a report within 3 months. Now, either whether we are going to amend the PTA or whether we are going to redraft a new piece of legislation. So this issue of being taken in under PTA various inquiries, we hear now, even yesterday the Cardinal did make a statement on Easter Sunday bombing when we were in opposition. It was one of the biggest massacres of the terrorists after the defeat of terrorism. Even foreigners had to succumb. Almost 300 Sri Lankans succumbed to this. I think even few more hundred are today totally bedridden. But the inquiries must go to the end. Presidential commission appointed by the last government, the report was submitted. Certain litigation has started, but there are some more that has to be brought to court. It's a matter for the Attorney General to decide. And we hope that the Attorney General's Department will take the appropriate steps and go forward. Now, again, if not for the PTA, some argue how could have been pursued in this manner. We had the former IG who was sent on compulsory leave. Let us not forget, because the country forgets fast. Head of the police service being sent on compulsory leave, he could not have been removed unless the commission decided to remove him. And until the last government went home, he still was the IGP. What a state of affairs. I don't say whoever is found guilty by judicial process, and if there has been enough evidence prior to, every government must have the right to advise such an officer to stand down and go. No one in that manner should be in charge of any security arrangements. We forget what the one-time President Sirisena says, and the counter what the former Prime Minister says about the President. What have we gone through? We are happy that Sri Lanka has survived. I mean, in a state of such a unstable, insecure government. But we have to take a lot of steps to correct what most of the wrongs of those years, which this government has begun. It's court of law that decides about detention and continuity, but the PTA definitely will be revisited, and most of the sections that on which this matter is being raised will be due for relaxation. The government has been able to move on these matters. It depends on the charges under which or inquiry on which the PTA has been imposed. Okay, if the PTA should not be imposed on certain areas, and if the committee comes up with such recommendations, the government would pursue and make the necessary amendments and go to Parliament. We are acting positively, I must say. I think for all our nations, post-COVID development is going to be the major problem. Our financial rearrangements, debt relief, that's one. Economics affects politics, and it is economies that will affect politics or international relations in the next years as we come out of the COVID. I mean, the world has failed up to now to vaccinate the world. Let us face the reality. And Sri Lanka President has been taking this view that it should be available to all in the international forums. In relation to what I have mentioned earlier, our neutral, non-aligned foreign policy has to be maintained, strengthened, and put on a stronger wicket so that all our friendly countries that we have been working with on economic front, political front, and in other areas of cooperation, maritime lanes have been kept open by Sri Lanka for all maritime lines so that the traffic to Indian Ocean would flow, trade would flow. So these are going to be the major areas of possible factors in our international relations. And for all our countries, how we work together to come out of the COVID pandemic, post-COVID development of our economies, trade, and other relations with the rest of the world. Sri Lanka's friends being in the SAARC, we maintain our friendship with the SAARC. Our friendship as a key member of IORA, that is the Indian Ocean states, we have maintained our position, and we have been even elected as vice chair this year. BIMSTEC, we have maintained the position of BIMSTEC. We are the chair at the moment, and friendly relations with all, and relations with other countries that have been having economic relations for a long time: China, Japan, Russia, and the Gulf countries. We have had a very long relationship on trade and tariff agreements with Britain. So all these will play an important role. We qualify above others to deal with this country because of our President's neutral, non-aligned foreign policy, plus being the longest nation in this area which has been able to enjoy universal suffrage and parliamentary democracy for 90 years, which is a big asset that Sri Lanka has in dealing with most of our friendly nations.